What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Sports Nerds Podcast here on the 515 Podcast Network. My name is Brock Bierman, alongside, as always, with Dawson Livingston. Here recording an episode here. So if you're wondering why we look the same as we did in the last episode, if you're watching our live stream or pre-recorded stuff, it's because we're recording this one immediately after we ended that last live stream back on Tuesday. So this episode's probably airing on a Friday right now. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your Friday, and hopefully this podcast can help get you through the final day of the work week. We're going to preview the NFC South, which, comparing it to the last episode that we had with the AFC North, bit of a difference in terms of talent and entertainment value with this division.
Right, this division, like I told Brock before we started recording the first one, we are talking about the greatest, probably one of the better divisions in the league, and then I'm going to watch my language right there, but one of the worst divisions in the league right there. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, to say the least, this division hasn't been really competitive. Well, it's been competitive for their talent level. It's just not as entertaining or as elite as some of the other divisions that we have previewed. I mean, yeah, they do have the Super Bowl. They do have a recent Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks with Tom Brady, but since then, nobody from this division has won since the Buccaneers back in 03, 04. Whenever they beat the Raiders. Didn't they beat the Raiders or something like that?
The Saints won a Super Bowl.
Oh, I always forget about that Super Bowl with Drew Brees, honestly.
The surprise onside, bro. Which you no longer can do. Thanks, NFL. No fun league. Sorry.
I mean, you're not wrong. Dude, I'm still getting used to the new kickoff rules. It just looks weird.
It's so goofy looking, but I think it's going to be more fun.
It's, again, like they said when they made this rule, it's to get more kick returns to be actually impactful versus everybody just taking a knee, and to prevent injuries. And the UFL has been able to prove that that is a legit thing that happens when you do this form of kickoff. So we'll see. Hopefully I end up enjoying it. I've been asked by a couple people my thoughts, and I jumped the gun and I was like, I hate it. But then I was like, I can't be that old head that says I hate everything just because it's different. So I'm going to go into it with an open mind, but we'll see. But back with the NFC South, this is going to be one of the more boring previews in my personal opinion, just because these teams are just not entertaining. Let's just start with the Atlanta Falcons, probably because they're the heavy favorites to win this division with the addition of Kirk Cousins coming off. Of course, he's coming off that Achilles injury, but they also drafted a quarterback in the first round with Michael Penix, which we mentioned on a previous podcast is some of the most weirdest form of drafting. I don't know what their goal is with that, because Kirk Cousins isn't necessarily retiring after this year. Oh, I guess, yeah. They also, new head coach with Raheem Morris, who was the Rams DC, as well as getting the Rams QB coach, which, I mean, anytime you're getting any form of offensive mastermind from the Rams organization, that's a good thing. So Zach Robinson's going to be the OC, and the fact that he was the QB coach when they won the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, maybe that will help Kirk Cousins as he's getting into his later years in his career. What are your thoughts on this Falcons team? Of course, they went 7-10 last year. I think a lot of that had to do with their offense, not just their offense, but the team as a whole wasn't elite. And by no means is this team elite this year. I do think their offense, though, this season could be one of the more entertaining teams to watch.
Right. This team has made a plethora of offseason moves. Obviously, the big name guy they brought in is Kirk Cousins, who is leaps and bounds better than the quarterbacks that they had last year. I'm just going to say this right now. Ritter was their starter. He started 13 games for him, had 12 interceptions, 12 touchdowns, and had a QBR 40. So if that goes to show you what kind of quarterbacks they were working with last year, I think that's all the proof that you need. Obviously, like you said, they drafted Michael Penix, who is probably going to be the eventual successor to Kirk, but who knows how soon that will be. They still have guys like Drake London, Bijan, they made some additions to the defense within the last few weeks that I really like a lot. Trading for a guy like Matthew Judon from New England for only a third round pick, I think is a massive win.
Steal.
And Matthew Judon gets to stay in red sleeves, which is always a plus. I love Mr. Red Sleeves out there. They signed a guy like Justin Simmons, who's going to help that secondary and pair great with Jesse Bates, who was already one of the better safeties in the league, but now you got two current All Pros or former All Pros back there in your secondary. Guys like AJ Terrell are going to be good. They still have Grady Jarrett. I really like this Falcons roster. I'm sure you're a fan of it as well. I think this team's easily going to probably run away with this division. They didn't really lose a whole lot in the offseason. I mean, they lost Cordero Patterson, which I guess was a pretty big contributor for him last year. But a guy like Desmond Ridder, who they traded to Arizona, just got cut today.
Yep.
And it says that they lost Jonnu Smith, but I couldn't tell you where Jonnu Smith is playing football right now.
The biggest question I have is this the year people need to draft Kyle Pitts in fantasy football? Because it seems like every year since he's been in the NFL, is this the year you take him and he turns up and goes off for you? Because I do think talent-wise is up there as one of the most talented tight ends. It's just I don't know if he's been in a situation like this where he actually might be able to get the ball because he has a competent quarterback.
Right. I mean, even since I think he had Matt Ryan his first year. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the year that he had 1,000 yards. I'm going to pull this up really quick. Yeah, that was his only 1,000-yard season in the league was his rookie year when he had Matt Ryan. So if that goes to show you what he can do with good quarterback play, I don't know what will. Like this past season, he only had 667 yards and 3 touchdowns, which ironically enough, 3 touchdowns is his career high for a season, which is wild. But like you said, if they got a guy like Kirk Cousins who's going to dish the ball out. We saw what he's able to do in Minnesota. He's able to not only give guys like Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson involved, but Jordan Addison, Dalvin Cook when he was still there, Alexander Madison when he was still there. Like, Kirk Cousins has shown the ability to spread the ball around where it's not going to be one receiver centric. But man, a guy like Drake London this year is going to be an absolute monster for the Falcons.
And Bijan Robinson. At least Bijan needs to be. He was my pick for Rookie of the Year, or at least Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. And I feel like he was a little more disappointing compared to what I may have expected. Both of our Offensive Rookie of the Year picks are in this division from last season, and both of them were a little more underwhelming compared to maybe what we expected. But I do think this team is going to definitely improve. Their floor this year is better than what their record was last year for my predictions. They were 7-10 last year. I have their ceiling this season at 10-7, maybe 11, maybe. I don't really know if I could convince myself that that's a good decision to predict, but 10-7 is really ideally where I have them at, and then their floor around 8-9. If for some reason Kirk Cousins does show his age, maybe he gets hurt again and Penix is forced into there and Penix wasn't ready, or something else happens.
I agree with you. I don't think there's any realm of possibility where they go worse than they were last year. Just the amount of additions that they made in the offseason, there's no plausible scenario where I see it going south for them, or that south, I should say. With that being said, I would say their floor, like you said, is 8-9, 9-8, and that's just if like Kirk is still struggling, offense isn't really clicking together. I'm gonna be honest though, I think their ceiling is 12-5. Okay. You could potentially talk me into 13-4 because the lackluster division they play in. Because honestly, if you take care of your division wins, you have 6 wins no matter what. And I'm not saying they're going to go 6-0 in the division because teams like New Orleans always seem to give Atlanta trouble. Teams like Tampa always seem to give Atlanta trouble. As much as I love my Panthers, I just don't really see it this year. Maybe next year. But I just think there's no way for the Falcons to finish worse than 9. I'm going to say 9-8 and finish I'll say their ceiling is 12-5. I just really like the moves they made in the offseason.
Yeah, I can see it for sure, especially like you mentioned this less than impressive division. If they can even be 4-2, man, that's going to set them up for a very, very successful season with this schedule. The next team on my list for teams to talk about, of course, would be Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield had a huge season, in my opinion, at least compared to previous Baker Mayfield seasons for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. Him and Mike Evans both got an extension. Mike Evans, I think, is still yet to not have a 1,000-yard receiving season in his career, which is unbelievable to say the least. And I feel like he's probably going to have another 1,000-yard receiving yard season. And Baker Mayfield's going to be a big part of that. I mean, I think they still have Godwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this team still has their kind of main receivers from that Super Bowl win a couple years ago. I think they're going to be right in the mix with Atlanta potentially this year. Dawson, we've talked about this before. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan, so that's a big reason why. But I just feel like this team hasn't necessarily lost a ton. They did lose, one of their coordinators to Carolina, who is now their head coach for the Panthers. But 9-8 last year. They were 4-2, and like we mentioned, that's huge when talking about this division that is not necessarily impressive. So if you can get as many division wins, it's a good thing. So I got their ceiling, maybe even improving, because now Baker Mayfield's got a season under his belt with this organization and this offense. Maybe him and Evans can connect a little more, or even Godwin. So I got them around 10-7 as well, with a floor around 8-9. So actually I have Tampa Bay and Atlanta kind of in the same boat. It's more of who wins their season series. And if one of them goes 2-0, without a doubt, I would pick them to win the division.
Tampa didn't make as many moves as I thought they did in this past offseason. But they didn't really lose a whole lot either. Kind of like what you said. They lost Devin White to Philly, and they traded Carlton Davis to Detroit, I believe. So, I mean, those are really the only major losses that I had for this Tampa Bay team. They were able to draft a guy like Graham Barton, who's going to start at center or guard for them, which is going to be big. One of my additions is Randy Gregory, but I'm 90% sure he just got cut by Tampa, which is cool. But yeah, they're able to keep most of that same team intact from last year when Baker Mayfield thrived. Baker last year had 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 picks, and a 54.3 quarterback rating, QBR, and a pass rating of 94.6. So like I said, if Baker's able to duplicate that, I think Tampa Bay set up for a lot of success this year. I really like I like them keeping their receivers. Obviously, when you have a guy like Mike Evans, who's basically a knock on wood 1,000-yard receiver every single year, I think that helps. If they're able to get a good Chris Godwin, I think that's only going to help more. Godwin last year had 1,000 yards, only 2 touchdowns though, but he had 130 targets, 83 receptions. So if they're able to get like 2020 or 2019 Chris Godwin, I think this is going to be one of the more fun offenses to watch in the league. I would say there's 4. I would say it's about 8-9, so not that much worse than they were last year. But I would say their ceiling definitely is 11-6, just because they're going to play teams like Carolina and New Orleans that aren't necessarily great rosters, and then maybe can snag a couple division wins off of.
Yeah, you've basically said everything that I would about this team. We're kind of in the same boat. I think you're a little more confident in both the Falcons and the Buccaneers, which is fine by me, because I would love to see both of these teams kind of take the next step, especially Tampa Bay, being a big Baker Mayfield fan. Now we get to the other half of the NFC South. Which team specifically do you want to talk about first?
We're talking about my Panthers last, if that's what
okay.
We're talking about the Saints.
Okay, so let's talk about the Saints. The first year with Derek Carr was not ideal. I'll let you start with this one. I want to get your opinions on the Saints before I give my 2 cents.
Okay. Looking at Carr's numbers, they aren't necessarily as bad as I thought they were. I mean, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 56 QBR. Like, that's not terrible. But he only had 3,800 yards, which in today's league is not very many. What is that? That's of 18 or 17 games in a season. It's like a little over 210, 220 yards a game, which I feel like in order to be a great offense, you have to average at least 250, 260 yards a game. With that being said, this team is just kind of the same over and over and over. Like, they still have, like, Alvin Kamara. I really like Chris Olave a lot. Like, he's one of my favorite receivers to watch. Do they still have Michael Thomas on that team?
I will look.
But, yeah, this team
agent.
doesn't really... What?
I think
he's a free agent. Yeah, this team, I don't know. I like some of the moves they made in the offseason. Getting a guy like Talise Fuaga is going to bolster the offensive line, especially since I think Ryan Ramczyk is either out for half the season or out for the year. They added Kool-Aid McKinstry in the draft, who's going to solidify that secondary. They drafted Brock's guy, Spencer Rattler, in the draft, who I know Brock's high on. And they even signed a guy like Chase Young, so maybe that can help their edge rusher. I just don't see it with the Saints. Like I told Brock before we started this episode, the Saints is where veteran players go when they're just like, you know what, I know I'm not going to win Super Bowls anymore. I'll make my money and I'm just going to ride off into the sunset. I just feel like that's where a lot of veteran players, their careers go to die.
I could argue, though, that they're making some moves to become a little younger, which is a good sign. You know, you mentioned Kool-Aid McKinstry. Christian Boyd from UNI, I think, was their 199th pick, will be a key addition for their team this year. Chase Young's not necessarily old, but he's definitely not young.
He's got some injury history.
And injury history. It's funny that you mentioned my guy. If I'm New Orleans, I'm sorry. The car experiment. Let me restart that. If I'm New Orleans, the car experiment is over.
Really? Just a year in?
I'm sorry. He has never impressed me to the point where it's like, yeah, this guy should be playing, should be QB1. Let my boy Spencer Rattler cook. Give him an opportunity
that's funny.
to at least prove whether or not he should be in the NFL or not. Carr's not doing anything for a franchise to where they can excel into a Super Bowl. Why not give this Rattler guy, who I believe has a lot of raw talent, the opportunity to show, yes, I can be potentially the next guy that everybody talks about as being a very late pick in the NFL draft that turns out to be really good. Not saying he's going to have a Hall of Fame career whatsoever, because the Saints need to have a lot of weapons to be able to put around him. But what I am saying is I do think that Rattler can put the Saints in a better position for the future than Carr can, because Carr is past his prime. Carr doesn't have any reliable targets to throw to, so you might as well just give this rookie who doesn't really have any experience or I don't know, nobody's got footage on him when it comes to the NFL, so might as well give him the opportunity to show what he's got.
I don't hate that take. Here's the issue, though. The cap number for Derek Carr the next 2 years. It's gonna be bad. $51 million next year, $61 million the year after.
They signed into that, right?
Yep. And 2027. And this is where it gets better. In 2027, when he's not on the team anymore, is still an $18 million cap hit.
The Saints are so stupid for signing into that. Carr's never been a guy that I thought could ever take a team to a Super Bowl unless he was given a billion weapons to throw to or hand the ball off to. He's not going to take this team anywhere, especially with the Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting better. there's no way this team is competing for a playoff spot, let alone like even a winning season. Honestly, there's no. I don't even have their ceiling as a winning season.
Really? Okay.
I think they're going to be trash, dude.
Here's the issue with New Orleans, and I think what they've been doing the last few years, and it's finally caught up to them. When Drew Brees was in his last few years with the Saints, it's like, okay, we got Drew Brees. That's a Hall of Fame quarterback. We got to go all in. So we're going to just push all of our restructure money years in the future. Like, we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to try to compete for Super Bowl. And if they didn't lose to Tampa Bay in the divisional round, a team they had beaten twice that year, who knows? Maybe what?
Or the pass interference against
right. Like, there's plenty of examples. Minneapolis Miracle. Like, I mean, like I could just keep going. How the Saints. I think there's another Vikings playoff game where
they lost in overtime in New Orleans.
Like,
yep.
All those years of pushing back money has now led the Saints to be a really old and a really expensive team that is just trying anything to stay relevant. I think that's why they tried to get Derek Carr. And I think that move is going to come to bite them pretty bad.
Get my boy Rattler in.
I don't know. I'm with you, though. I don't think this team's going to be very good. I think this team, I don't know. I don't think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league because this team still has too much talent for me on this roster.
They'll be in the top 10.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I got them at their ceiling at 8-9. 5-2 is their floor.
Yeah, I mean, they went 9-8 last year, which looking at their schedule, I don't know how.
Atlanta's better.
Right, Atlanta's better. Let me see. They split the Atlanta series. They split the Tampa Bay series. I think Tampa Bay is a better team than them right now. They beat the Carolina Panthers twice. Who knows? Carolina's they're a frisky team. I don't know. But
like, yes, you're exactly right. They go to like this schedule, they go to Dallas. They go to Kansas City. They go to Green Bay. And then they host some decent teams too with the Browns, Rams, Broncos, maybe a frisky team like you mentioned with the Panthers, the Commanders to potentially. I just don't like their schedule whatsoever. And so the combination of that being an old team and just not having enough talent, I don't think this team is going to have a good season. There's no way that they have a winning record this year. If they have a winning record, I will actually be shocked.
If they have a winning record, Brock's going to buy a Trevor Penning jersey. You and I legend at tackle.
Might have to.
But I think me and you on the same boat with the ceiling. I don't think there's any way this team wins more than 8 games. Their floor, I don't know how bad their floor is going to be with how much, like, I still like a lot of these players on this roster. I like Chris Olave, like Cam Jordan. I like what they have on defense still. But I'm going to be honest. I think their floor is 5 games. Like, there's a scenario where I think they realize halfway through the season. Yes, they're like, hey, Carr, pack your bags, buddy. You're going. You're going back to your couch.
Learn from Denver.
We're just going to roll with around.
Just pay for it. Just get it over with.
And Denver, honestly, that's probably the best thing Denver could have done because Denver's going to be bad this year. They're probably going to be a little bit better next year, but still fairly bad. But they're being able to reset, which is what you want to do. And hopefully Sean Payton finally found his guy in Bo Nix, and he's able to do something for Denver. Because if he did, man, that takes a heck of a lot of pressure off of a guy like Sean Payton, who is labeled as like a quarterback whisperer with Drew Brees and other guys like that.
Yeah, I just will finish with this. Spencer Rattler doesn't play. This team's not winning more than 5 games.
So what's your 4? I don't know if I caught that. What's your 4?
5 games.
5 games, so we got the same?
Yep. I just...
Gotcha.
They're not beating Dallas. They're not beating Atlanta at Atlanta. They're not beating Kansas City. They're probably not going to beat Los. I don't think they could. They could potentially do what the Panthers, who we'll get to in a second, did last year and go winless on the road this year. Maybe the Giants. The Giants is a weird team. So I'm just saying, it's just not a good situation if you're a New Orleans Saints fan.
It's not looking good.
Now let's get to your Panthers.
Let's go.
2-15 last year.
Yep. Only can go up.
One divisional win. 2-6 at home. And like I mentioned earlier, 0-9 on the road.
I forgot this team beat the Houston Texans. That is crazy.
One of their 2 wins.
One of their 2. The other is against the Falcons, who both of those teams are going to be good this year.
It's crazy to think about.
Oh,
crazy to think about. They did get the addition of Deontay Johnson from the Steelers, who I think will have a bounce back season now that he actually has a quarterback that can probably throw him the ball. He hasn't necessarily been on the level that everybody may have expected him to be at this point. I mean, 2021 had 1,100 yards and then 8 touchdowns, and since then has only had 5 touchdowns in the past 2 seasons. So, what are your thoughts on the Panthers? Are they going to be a surprise team? Yeah, you're going to hate my floor and ceiling.
Oh man,
I don't feel good. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 13 of the games on here are below 39% confidence.
That's rough. What's funny is I don't even know why I started hyping up this Panthers team. I think it's just funny because the Panthers they've just been so bad the last few years. I just feel like I got to pick one team and just bandwagon. I don't hate what Carolina did this offseason. Like, I know I got to get this out of the way before I talk about what they did. The Caleb Williams, or the Bryce Young trade, if Bryce Young goes down as a bust, I know it's already considered one of the worst trades ever. But man, oh man, oh man. Is that just more, it's just infinitely more funny if Bryce Young turns out he's like just not very good. So I'm just going to say that because
CJ Stroud.
They passed up CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and then they basically passed up Caleb Williams is what they did, which wild to think about. But regardless, I like some of the moves they made. They added the running back from Texas, Jonathan Brooks, who I think is hurt until like week 4 or 5, but hopefully should be back. He'll be a good
addition once he gets on the field.
Right, he was the first running back taken in this past draft, and I think he's going to give them an option at running back that you want to surround your rookie second-year quarterback with as many weapons as possible. So adding a guy like him is going to be really helpful. They added a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, but at this point in his career, who knows how much he really has left. If he's able to contribute, I think that anything helps for them. I think 2 of my favorite additions, though, were the offensive line. They added Robert Hunt from Miami. I think they gave him a huge contract. I think more than 80 mil or 100 mil, if I'm remembering that right. And then they added another offensive lineman from Seattle in Damian Lewis, who should help them. Their offensive line was not very good last year. I'm looking up this. Yeah, Bryce Young got sacked 62 times last year.
That's a big oof.
That's rough. And Bryce, to be fair, Bryce Young did not look good in the games he was in. Like 59.8% completion percentage, 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 picks, with a QBR of 33. Did not look good. I won't lie.
Nope.
I do think, however, with some of the additions that they've made in the offseason, I do think he can be a good quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. They did lose some players that I really like this past season, though. They traded Brian Burns to the Giants, I believe, and he signed a huge contract. They lost Jeremy Chin to, Washington. And I know they traded Dante Jackson to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson. Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dante Jackson, I'm sorry. But I don't hate this Carolina Panthers roster. It's just rough for me. Because I've been hyping them up the last 3 weeks, and Brock's expecting me to put them with a ceiling of 13 wins and a floor of 10. But I just think they're 4. I think it's 3 wins. I think they're marginally better this season. Their ceiling, I could see 6, 7 wins. Like, I could see them upsetting a few teams that they're not supposed to. But I think this team is just too young, and they're just 2 or 3 years away.
Ceiling, I got them at 4-13.
Oh,
Floor,
man.
I got them at 2-15. Or
Oh, man.
2-15.
Okay, these are my final ones. I'll say floor is 13-4, ceiling is 6-11.
13-4.
Or 3-14 is what I meant. I did that in the last episode, not the one we recorded today. Last week's.
Where out here totally giving the hype on the Panthers for 13 wins.
13-4. 2015 Cam Newton has walked in the door, and they are going to the Super Bowl.
I'm back.
Yeah. That's already been 3 years, which is crazy.
Oh, jeez. This team's gonna be. I'm sorry, this team's gonna be trash.
Doo-doo.
It's not gonna be good if you're a Carolina Panther fan. But any final thoughts before we wrap up this week? I think we might combine the last two divisions for a big episode on Monday or Tuesday of next week, and then we might do a final preview and then preview week 1 on Thursday, if that works for you. And we can record some of those. But NFL starts next week, dude.
It's crazy.
It's one of my favorite things. Got a couple fantasy drafts, got to get through, of course. But any final thoughts?
Not really with the NFC South. You just reminded me I don't know if your fantasy leagues do punishments, but one of my fantasy leagues was talking about as a punishment, the loser in the league has to redo the ACT. So,
gosh,
really not trying to finish last in that division. So, I just didn't know if you guys did anything for your fantasy league. I know me and Brock do a family one where it's me and Brock and several others.
It's the most casual fantasy league you can ever be in. Yeah. Because half the people don't know what's going on, which is fine.
And certain people have traditions of who they pick, a.k.a. my father. My father will take Mahomes in first round, and it's typically another Chief in the second round, like Tyreek, or I guess former Chief. And he will just load up on Iowa players and Iowa State players. And then after that, he checks his phone maybe once every 3 weeks.
He probably has the best fantasy name of all time.
It is. And for those of you that don't know, my dad's fantasy name is Chris Jones. That's just all it is. It's just Chris Jones.
It's his favorite player. If we could somehow ever get him to meet Chris Jones, dude, that would be amazing. Do you think he likes him more than LeBron?
That'd be a question I have to ask him.
Because, honestly, I know your dad loves LeBron, but, I think he likes Chris Jones more than LeBron. I think Chris Jones might be his favorite athlete of all time.
I think it's his most likable athlete. Like, a guy he just, and again, it goes back to when me and him were at Chiefs Steelers. Oh, man, is it 8 years already?
Oh, jeez.
Chris Jones' rookie year, maybe 7 years ago. When it was our first Chiefs game ever. We got good tickets. We were right behind the Chiefs bench, and rookie Chris Jones is going bananas on the sideline, hyping up the crowd, getting everyone into it. And my dad's like, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Oh, that's Chris Jones." And from then on, he's just been a diehard Chris Jones fan, more so than I would think a Kelsey or a Mahomes fan, if I had to be honest.
Oh, he's the biggest Chris Jones fan in the world.
Yeah.
Literally has a fantasy football team name, just Chris Jones. That's it.
Yep. It's not even Stone Cold Jones, which is what his nickname is. It's just Chris Jones.
Just Chris Jones, which is great. It's amazing, honestly. Mad respect for the greatest fantasy football team name of all time. But until then, I guess getting back on to what we were talking about, both of us think that the Falcons are probably the heavy favorites for this division. Tampa Bay may be able to compete, and then the Saints and Panthers are kind of battling for the bottom position. And I do believe that Spencer Rattler should get in at some point for the Saints. We'll see if that actually happens. But that was pretty much it for the NFC South, a little shorter episode for you. We'll be back next week for the final two divisions that we haven't previewed, and then also give out our actual division picks as well as our Super Bowl matchup pick and who we have winning this year's Super Bowl. I have a feeling I know who you're going to end up picking for your Super Bowl, but we'll see what happens next week.
We'll see.
Until then, make sure that you guys follow and subscribe anywhere that you see us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for live streams. We're getting close to being able to live stream again on Twitter. We'll let you guys know when that's back up and running. But until then, Facebook and YouTube are the best places to watch us. To listen to our podcast, you can find us on SoundCloud, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Just search up 515 Podcast Network. And then we're also on Instagram and TikTok, which Dawson's been grinding out and putting out some videos for us. I think we're going to get our Instagram back up and running with content as well as we get closer and closer to the NFL season. So we'll see you guys next week. The NFL season starts next week. I love it. Best time of the year. But we'll see you guys then. Until then, enjoy the first weekend, or I guess the first official week 1 weekend of college football. Both Dawson and I will be at our respective universities' games. He'll be at Iowa versus Illinois State. Kirk Ferentzless Iowa football team.
First time Kirk Ferentz or Hayden Fry haven't been the head coach of Iowa since, I think it's like November 1978.
That's crazy.
My dad was 4 the last time Iowa hasn't had Kirk Ferentz or
that's crazy.
Hayden Fry.
That's crazy. But I will be at Iowa State versus North Dakota. Not North Dakota State, North Dakota. So I feel a little better going into this week. But we'll see you guys next week. Super Bowl picks next week here on the 515 Podcast Network.